All right. Thank you all very much. Today's program is on the social square dance movement, and I'm going to call it a movement. I know that Color Lab has just, made it an official program of their offerings. And Bear is going to tell you about it, and then the lovely Deborah Carroll Jones, and I see John is with us. They're going to talk about the program that they have had going down in Texas for the last 5 years. So this is our latest installment. And Bear is a member of Color Lab's governing board of directors, and he is from Denver. And Miss Deborah, and she and John are longtime members of Color Lab. They're both international square dance callers, and they affectionately called themselves Bear and the Bearettes. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Bear and the Bearettes and our tribute to social square dancing.
All righty. So it's not allowing me to
try it
share
now.
my screen yet. Good morning, everybody. While we're getting this clarified, there we go.
Yeah.
And all right. So anyway, so we're going to give you the basics here. And I am Bear Miller. I am from Denver, Colorado. I've been calling since 1991. So I'm in the world of square dance callers, as you all well know, I'm kind of still a new kid on the block. It's just kind of an amazing thing. But it's good to be here. I thank Bonnie for asking us to do this, and I'm truly honored to have Deborah doing this presentation with me. So the real question is social square dancing. Why do we need it? Well, it's pretty simple. We can look around and we're slowly dying. Then we had a pandemic, which to help quicken our demise. And we, including me, for many, many years, are guilty of not seeing our activity through the new dancer's view. And that's something we have to kind of rearrange if we want to redig ourselves back out and build the pyramid where the base is the casual dancer, the recreational dancer, and not the voracious dancer who dances 5 times a week. Not everybody's going to do that. It's interesting is that Denver in Colorado, where I live, is a very strong mainstream area. But here is the dreaded but to the whole thing. With over 90% of the clubs being mainstream in Colorado, over 95% of the dancers, the existing dancers, dance at least a soft plus. Somehow that really doesn't add up to a strong mainstream community.
Bear,
in my opinion.
Bear, I'm not sure we're seeing your slides.
Seeing them fine here.
Are you? Okay.
I see him.
Okay.
Seeing them fine here.
We're seeing him also.
Very
We
good.
are too.
Sorry for the interruption then.
No worries. So in my opinion, one of the biggest causes to a lot of our escalator creep that we've always had is that when new dancers come to, it's a star tip, whatever your program is, putting that tip in the middle of the dance, at the end of the dance, new dancers come to the dance and then must sit out while the experienced dancers not only just dance, but they pre-plan their square and they're excited about it. When I learned to dance in 1990, I just watched people as we did, and the 4th tip was always plus, and there was a big to-do about it. Well, guess what? I didn't want to sit. I didn't want to do that. So how fast could I learn plus? I didn't even take a class. I immediately jumped on the bandwagon and wanted to learn that next program. And if you put that star tip at the end of the dance, which seems like a better option in some ways, then you have 2 endings and you lose out on the social bonding opportunities. And that's what our activity is really all about. It's about all the social things, the people we know, the people we've hung out with, the people we do. But the main thing is within our club is where that happens. And especially we're going to lose that opportunity with the new dancers who, well, let's see, the dance ended for us. We can sit around and watch, or we can go home. Well, there goes your bonding time. So enough of that, let's get on to the real thing. Social square dancing, what is it? There's some great pieces of work out there in describing the history and details of social square dancing. Barry Johnson has been just amazing putting presentations together. And so if you want to see some, look him up and look at some of his presentations. He does a great job in the history of it, how it came about to be, what kind of got it going. It's been a process for over 20 years, believe it or not. And but it's what it is. So this presentation, though, is more of a quick look. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how to implement it. And of course, then we're going to have Deborah, who's been doing it for years down in Texas. So it's nice to see an actual model to see how it actually goes. This presentation is mostly a work by collaboration that I did with Barry Clasper and Brad Bruner and Kurt Gullenhart, who I see is here today, which is good to have him here. These gentlemen are not only talented in the skill of wordsmithing and getting an amazing amount of information into a nutshell, they were just great to work with. And I felt like I was hanging on because they were just amazing in those skills. And I think Bonnie has the paper and she can distribute it, or it's available on the Color Lab website and the Color Lab Knowledge. So now, exactly what is social square dancing? It's a Color Lab approved alternate entry level destination, keyword there is destination, dance program. It's intended for use without requiring any change to any other dance program. Social square dancing uses a 50 call subset of basic / mainstream. They're chosen to maximize variety, fun, and easy learning. The early list they came up with, and what they did is they had somebody a whole lot more dedicated than me would go to festivals and weekends with a chart in their hands and would sit there in a hall and mark down exactly what was being used, what call this, they call this, they call this, they call that. And then they came up with a count for all those things. That was the original setup for the calls they're going to use, because those are the calls, if you went to a mainstream dance on a weekend, that's the calls that were being used. Well, it's more than just a call list, though. The whole approach is bringing back a focus on the social and the entertainment aspects of square dancing at the entry level to attract and retain a broader base of casual dancers. Because we've all gotten into the activity and we've all loved the activity, and we've just jumped into that whole escalator, and that base now is not there at the bottom. The base is in the plus and in the advanced program, and it's teetering on a triangle on the tip instead of the other way around. It's also to make more classes accessible. They're shorter, they're easier, and you can do it multiple times during a year. If the goal is to provide ongoing dancing with variety at this entry level. It takes more work on the callers, but it's well worth it to be able to do. And many dancers will be content to stay with social square dancing. As needed, you can make social square dancing the plus classes available to a bridge to plus for those more avid learners, but they won't feel like they need to do it. But if they want more, there is more, and we can have to make that accessible to them. So the 3 pillars of social square dancing, first one is a shorter. They're 12 to 14 weeks. You can easily do a class 2 to 4 times a year. And it's a much less of a commitment. We all know what happens when we start a class in September, October, then the holidays come. We always lose some people because the holidays come through. Well, if you can start in September, you can be done before the holidays. And then they're hooked and they're dancing and they're going out to dances, and it's much easier. New dancers, the prospects can start quicker. And the most important progress to the whole thing is that friends can bring friends to the next class. And it isn't waiting for the whole next year. It's you can bring them in a very short time period and have them come along and be part of the excitement. The social aspect of it is the most important thing to the whole thing. The emphasis is on social bonding. There's less focus on technicalities. And most beginners' goals is to learn just enough to have some fun dancing. Avid learners can take more classes later on. If you sign up to take a guitar class, you're not necessarily wanting to be able to go up there and be Jimi Hendrix and be able to jump on stage and do that. You want to play guitar, you want to be good enough to sing around the campfire in the backyard with your family, and you want to play, but not necessarily when you get into it, you're not looking to get into it to immediately, how good can I get at it with all, I want to be able to do all kinds of playing of the guitar. I don't necessarily care about that. I just want to get into it and play and get to do what I want to do with it. The most important thing then at that point is to let them dance. They integrate the spirit of dancing quickly and to minimize the learn mode. Because we spend too much time learning, and then we get done with one class and we jump into another class. The focus is on entertainment, and it should be fun dancing for all dancers, which once again puts a lot of emphasis on the callers making that possible, and to provide social square dancing year round, so that when people come on, they just don't end up stepping away and being told that it's time to shut down for the summer. We need to figure out a way, even in some areas, to make sure that we can dance all the time to keep those people interested and wanting to be part of the activity. So there they are, shorter, social, and let them dance. The benefits, it's easier to recruit for a shorter class. One of our biggest things with marketing has always been, well, you know, come to our thing. I'm going to take 24 weeks worth of classes, and we can do twice a week. We can get it on 11, 12 a week, but it's forever in class. And now we can offer a shorter thing. So it's a much more easier marketing process to be able to do. It's now going to be the length of a college class, just once a week if you want to go that way. The goal is also to retain more new members by supporting the casual dancers. We have to really look at it through the eyes of those new people, and not, we're as leaders, we've been doing it for a while and we like what we'd like to have, so we end up doing more things with it. But we need to really have our new members be part of our activity and be able to do, and we have to pay attention to their needs. You can have more growth because you know multiple classes during the year. Gives you more opportunities to be able to do it. Friends can bring friends once again. And you can leave that escalator to plus for those best suited. They aren't necessarily being thrown into the hopper and being told, okay, next step. You know, you're done with this one. Where are you going to take your plus class? Oh, you should wait a little bit, but when are you going to take your plus class? When are you going to take your plus class? When are you going to dance plus with us? You got to wait. They shouldn't be forced. There's a lot of ways to implement it. You can structure your own SSD program. The initial thoughts out of it when they came out of Iowa and stuff with this program was, it was in an area that square dancing had almost completely died. And it's designed to be a standalone program in an area where there really wasn't any. Our focus is to be able to make it part of an existing program and be able to keep our existing dancers happy, as well as the new dancers that we bring in the activity, because we just can't turn our heads on the new people, on the experienced people, all the people here today. We need to be able to take care of our needs as well, and how we're going to do that. Existing clubs can modify or extend their current programs according to their circumstances. It's a matter of looking at logistics. It's a matter of looking at availability. It's a matter of how can we make this work for our group, not losing our existing dancers, and at the same time, how do we keep that? But we want to be able to jump into this whole thing and have social square dancing be something that we can get more people into our activity, because we all know how great our activity is. There are new groups who can be dedicated just solely to SSD if you have enough people who are interested in being able to do that. And then you can integrate and you can work those groups together very easily. You can have sister clubs. You can do a lot of different things with that. Multi-level clubs can easily replace the basic or mainstream with social square dancing as their entry level, and then eventually offering social square dancing to plus classes if needed. Plus only and plus entry clubs, which is part of our country, could add SSD or recruit from nearby SSD groups by offering social square dancing to plus classes. But once again, they can't go out and cherry pick. They can't go to the dances and say, oh, there's more, you got to go want to do this. You just kind of have to play it by ear and do it a casual recruiting that way. Mainstream only groups might refocus on social square dancing alone, or expand to support both social square dancing and either mainstream or plus. So there's lots of different ways you can look at doing it. Sometimes it's a matter of sitting down and doing some brainstorming and how can we make this work and not lose our existing dancers and yet be able to make a commitment to getting new classes. if everything in your area and everything in your club is not broken, and you're seeing an amazing upturn in people year after year, why would you even do this? You wouldn't. Why would you work with anything and break something that isn't broken? But I don't know many areas where I can see that the numbers are telling us that they shouldn't be doing more. Our numbers are declining everywhere. Europe and Japan really have amazing dancers. They keep them in basic and mainstream classes much longer than the United States, but their numbers are still dwindling just like everybody else's. In all cases, social square dancing should be a self-contained, not just a stepping stone to plus, and supporting ongoing social square dancing. You must treat social square dancers as first-class members of your club. That is highly important to be able to do. You need to really treat them with respect, and they aren't just, oh, you just dance social, you know, you're just square dancing. You're really not much until you're a plus dancer, and you know, we'll show you how that works, you know. And then make social square dancing to plus classes available to avid learners when they're ready, because you're going to have people who come in who are just ready for more. You know, those people who just, you know, they every call a caller gives them, they pick it up and they've got it right away. There's going to be some people who want more, and we still need to make that accessible and available for them to have. So that's social square dancing in a nutshell. So it sounds like a plan. Yeah, maybe we could do that. Or does it really, it sounds like a plan is something we need to work on, and how can we make it work for our area and our club and our group? And so, well, we really do need a plan. Here's my take on it. This is my mainstream club for years. I've been club caller now for 14 years of this club, and I love being there. I feel very honored to be their club caller. They'd only had one other club caller in their 50-year existence, and I'm now the second one. So for years, they did a typical dance schedule in the Colorado area, where they would do a half-hour pre-rounds, and I really believe rounds and square dancing have a place together. And then it was followed by 2 hours of square dancing with at least one plus tip, with rounds between tips. Now the rounds between tips, even if you're not an avid person of it, they should work together. They're still going to take a 5-minute break, whether we have music during that break and have the rounds going on, or whether the caller turns on some music or we turn off the music and we just socialize. It doesn't change anything for a newer dancer. And so it works. So round dancing should stay as part of our activity. But then the leadership, because they've been dancing around for a while, and these are the people who end up becoming leaders in our clubs, they wanted more. They wanted more plus, because that was what they liked to do. They enjoyed it. They like, well, can we do a second plus tip? You know, okay, well, if we do with a 4th tip, can we throw one in at the end and make 2 and make us happier? Well, that's really good for the existing dancers, but it sure isn't really good for a new dancer coming in, whether it's mainstream club or whether it's now a social square dancing. It really doesn't work. Mike Hogan talked about that in his presentation for USDA, that as leaders, we want to make it how it is that what fills our needs. And somehow we have to broaden that horizon to fill what the new dancers needs in and fill the club's needs by getting new people. So my compromise at that point was to add another, not wanting to make another plus tip and have the dancers sit during the dance once again. And we decided to offer a half-hour of plus before the pre-rounds. So at 7 o'clock, or instead of starting at 7:30, we changed it so that we were then dancing 7:30 till 8 was pre-rounds, and the squares were from 8 to 10. We now dance a half-hour plus from 7 to 7:30. And then we have the half-hour of plus. And then we make it known for the dancers, for dancers and stuff, that the dance officially begins at 8 o'clock. So when the new dancers walk in and they're new, they get there just before 8 o'clock. They watch some round dancing. That's not unusual. And then, because it's going to be part of their rest time, and if they get attracted to that, that's a whole separate issue. But then they could do what they wanted to do. So it was a good compromise. The experienced dancers were now getting 2 plus tips, and the ones who came at 8 didn't have to sit out during the dance. To me, made a good compromise. We've had pretty good success with it for the last 4 years. So my club is going to have an easy adaptation and have social square dancing replace the mainstream and keep our current format. We'll do a half hour of the plus, keep the current dancers happy. We'll have the half hour pre-rounds as we've done to make square dancing and round dancing work together. And then we'll have an hour and a half to 2 hours of dancing, but every tip will be on the social square dance program. So if you're a dancer who comes to dance, so that's what you dance. And it isn't a matter of just dancing that, but because that is what you do dance, then you'll be able to dance the entire night and people will dance. And then when we finish, everybody finishes together. If somebody wants to go out for a piece of pie afterwards or down to your local Freddy's for an ice cream in the summertime, or go to Applebee's and have an adult beverage, whatever you're going to do, well, you're all now finishing at the same time and you can do those things together. My job is to try to convince as many other mainstream clubs in our area to adopt a similar format and adopt social square dancing into their programs as well. Because if mine was the only club in town who did this, it'd be really tough. They would only could come and dance at my club. They couldn't go dance at any of the other mainstream clubs around town because they don't know all the mainstream calls. And I don't see a real need to bring them up through that. So luckily we've had commitments by 4 or 5 clubs in our area, and we're seeing outlying areas. I'm also now going to drive an hour to go teach a club in Fort Collins on Sundays, adding another night to my schedule to help them be able to do the social square dancing. And so they're changing their format. They're doing everything I've asked. And so I just like seeing people taking a chance on things. So there's a few people who've committed, but many are on the fence and trying to figure out what to do because change is hard and there's that comfort level. But if it ain't working and we're dying, why would we not want to call 911? Why would we not to take a chance on something different? Why would we not try something new? If it doesn't work, 3 years from now, we go back to what we've been doing and it's going to die that slow, gentle death. And right now, post-pandemic, well, we like to think it's post-pandemic. We feel things are better, but then we get all the new things. And so, but there's no better time than we've been burned to the crisp. We're on the ashes and we can be a phoenix now and we can move forward. So that's the basics of what it is, how it is, and we'll save some time for later on. But I would like to introduce the next presenter who actually has real life examples, because she and John have been working in Dallas Fort Worth area and had a club. But she is absolutely one of the best callers, one of the best teachers, one of the best entertainers, one of the best caller coaches. If you read her things on Facebook, you know that she is one of the best story writers. And she is just one of the absolute best talents in our activity. And we're very lucky because she also happens to be very passionate about square dancing. So I'm honored to call her my friend. But ladies and gentlemen, here is Deborah Carroll Jones.
Oh, thank you so much, Bear. I'm honored to call you my friend as well. I see that there's tons of questions in the chat room, so I'm going to try to condense my little talk with you kids so that we can get to as many of your questions and comments and concerns as we possibly can. I would hazard a guess that every single person that is tuned into this today is what I would term a square dancing survivor. You made it through a system that really wasn't structured to make this journey into square dancing as easy as it could be. Now, I've got to take my personal experience and fit it in here. I started dancing in the late 70s. I was only 28 years old, 27 years old. I could suck up that material as fast as you could give it to me. And we went through a mainstream call and a mainstream class. And at that point in time, there were 2+ lists. There was a +1, which were calls that were a step up. I see heads nodding. They were a step up from mainstream, and there was +2, and those calls were a step down from advanced. That system made logical sense to me, and it still does. I wish we still had it, but that's a non sequitur. So at some point in time, a decision was made to combine the plus program. So we have this jumble now of all these calls. The clubs in Southern California that were not mainstream were +1. There was one +2 club in all of Southern California. Well, the clubs that had been dancing +1 did not want to go back to being mainstream. So that meant that their members had to learn those additional 15 calls so that they could keep their plus status. We lost people at that point in time. When I'm saying that you guys are survivors, that's what I'm talking about. You were able to go through that funnel and come out the other end, but there were other people that didn't make it. A lot of people that didn't make it. And when my father started learning to square dance, and if you talk to me in any depth about square dancing, I'm going to bring my daddy into it, because Bear said something very interesting earlier. He stated that he had not really been looking through the eyes of new dancers and what they were experiencing and what they were looking for. And I was so fortunate that when Daddy decided to learn to square dance, and he's the only one in my family except for my daughter, whom I made learn to square dance, that actually decided to take up the activity. So I was really invested in him. I was excited, and I would call him every week and say, how did it go? And how was your lessons? And I learned so much that I was able to put to my own teaching through his eyes as a learner. And one of the things that he said, I want you kids to listen to this very carefully. He said, people do not go to learn to square dance to be made to feel stupid. That's how he felt sometimes on the floor. And he also said that he noticed that people were dropping out of the class. And he said, what happens to those people? I said, I don't know. They just can't cut it, I guess. Because I was into the choreo, man. I was taking workshops and I was going to be the best dancer, and I could dance either side. And man, my dancing skills, my choreographic skills were through the roof. But Daddy was worried about the others that we for so long in our activity were not worried about anymore. They just disappeared and went away. And he said, what about those gentler souls that can't handle this, but they still wanted to participate? Well, did we have a system to where they could? We did not. Now we do, but we didn't at the time. So when all of this was kind of in my mind when I became the club caller for the Texas Reelers. And as a traveling caller, it was a big deal for me to invest in a club at the local level. I wasn't sure if it would be a good match, a good mix. So we agreed to try it for a year. And if it worked out, then we would continue. And if it didn't, we would part ways with hugs and smooches and everybody be happy. So 8 years later, I'm still there. And our club, the Texas Reelers, is a mainstream club, and they had 2 plus tips. And after I taught my first class, I was watching through the eyes of those learners again, and I noticed that they're sitting out all the time. We had the first tip, we had the second tip, there's rounds before, there's rounds in between. They don't get to do that. Third tip was plus, they don't get to do that. Fourth tip was mainstream. Fifth tip was plus, they don't get to do that. And then the last tip. So I'm looking at how much time they're not getting to participate, and yet a class and those new people are the heartbeat of the club. And if your club doesn't understand it, they're on life support. And somebody needs to go, clear, and restart that thing and get classes going and get new people in. That's who we need to cater to. However, who is all sitting here right now? The survivors. Okay, those that made it through that tough, I don't know, it's like going through the Marine Corps, you know, you got to do that 50-mile hike or whatever it is with all that stuff on your back to be able to make it through. We did that. But we can't program now for ourselves anymore. We have to take a different look at what's going on. We have to approach it from a little different angle. So the first thing that I did for the reelers is I got rid of one of the plus tips. Did the plus dancers squawk? Yeah. But I tried to explain to them with all the love in my heart that our new people needed more time on the floor. And if you don't want to be president and vice president and secretary from now until the day the earth blows up, we need to have more people into this club that are going to meld and mesh and begin to take responsibility for the running of the club. So that clicked. That made a little bit of sense. So we did that. The very first time that we had our club members come to a dance, we called them, in those days, we called them student dances. And when they would come to a dance, I told them, just between them and me, from here on out, you are invited to any Texas Reelers dance, any one of them. Mother sees you walk in the door, Mother is going to call what you know. And everybody else is going to go along and they're not going to know what's happening. They're going to just be having a good time. They're going to be successful. The music's going to be good and they're going to be happy. Well, sometimes nobody came. So I didn't worry about adjusting my calling program to the students at that time. If they did, that was an immediate response from me. I would look out on the floor, and if they were squared up, I knew what I was going to call. I knew how I was going to adjust. If they weren't, if they were having a break, I knew how to fix that as well. So the caller has to be willing and able to make those kind of changes. And let me tell you something, dancers that have been around for a long time, it's a heck of a lot harder to call with fewer calls than it is to call with a lot of calls. You have to be inventive, you have to be creative, you have to be entertaining, and you have to work at it. And some callers don't want to do that. That's fine, that's fine. So now it came time to start another class. And you got to go through mainstream and then you got to go through plus. Let me tell you what happened when we did that. We did our mainstream class and then the club was going, we need a plus class. So Mother had one. And we lost every single dancer that had just gone through class. Every one without fail. They didn't feel confident enough to continue to come to the club dances. There was no place for them to practice. We weren't having another beginner class for 15 weeks, so they couldn't bring their friends and Angel and get their skills cemented. We lost them all. And I said, never again will I ever do that. And I haven't. And the club has asked for a plus class, and I'm like, that's great. I'd be happy to teach that for you. Find another hall and find another night, and I am happy to do that. But our class night, our beginner night is sacrosanct, and I will fight for that to the death because those are the heartbeat of the club. And I want this club to live and prosper. So we began to do the SSD program, and we do 2 classes a year. And we go for about 12 to 15 weeks. Bear was talking about starting classes in September and then the holiday attrition. And we stop for several weeks over the December holidays. We start back in January with a quote unquote workshop. And all that's about is just getting your skills back up, getting your confidence up, getting the dancing back under you, and away we go. And then after they've had those 8 weeks, and during those 8 weeks, they are also supposed to be recruiting, we start a new class. And that system has worked very well for the Texas Reelers. We have grown. It thrills me to go to a Christmas party that we were at a couple of years ago. And I said, if John and I taught you to square dance, would you please stand? And about 75% of the room stood up. That really meant a lot to me because those are now active, committed members of our club. And they have taken positions of responsibility and it's helping our club grow. So I've noticed that there's some questions about, well, what about the people that are the survivors that have made it through and they want the plus and all this kind of stuff? And also the idea that what if we're the only SSD club? So John and I did what Bear talked about, which is to go to other events and track the calls that are used by the callers. My club is mainstream. Okay, well, let's go there and hear a mainstream dance. And we would hear, there would be 12 to 15 calls that were never used. Happens all the time. Happens all the time, unless you call in Germany, and then by golly, you better use every single call. But at a regular American level dance, 12 to 15, 20 calls are never used. So as we begin to look at the calls that were being used, we realized that those callers that were saying that my club's mainstream and that's what we dance, but that's not what you're calling. You're calling SSD. So as we became a little more aware of that, and we began to put dancers out into the dancing community, we had a talk with our Callers Association and said, guys, if you know this is what we're doing and you know this is what we're working on at the Reelers, and if some of our dancers, if they make a visitation to your club, will you please be nice to them? And they all said, of course we will, Deborah. We'll cater to those dancers. We'll take care of them. And they have. Well, now with the shutdown, there are a lot more callers in the association that realize the benefit of having SSD as our general program and catering to the new dancers. The Dancers Association even realizes that there is now an issue and we need to cater to new people. And this is a vehicle that we can use to bring more new people in. The idea of I want what I want when I want it, that has got to be set aside if what the ultimate goal is for us to be able to keep this activity going. Then maybe what you want when you want it has to take a back seat, because square dancing is a folk activity and it is supposed to reflect societal changes. And we've had a lot in the last 40 years. And the fact that we have people that are not willing to commit to a year class is not surprising. But those that are doing this and programming this and running the clubs have got to realize that there have been changes. And now we have a way to help it, to bring the new people in, to keep them in the club, to keep them dancing, to bond them, to entertain them and have fun with them. When I taught second grade, those kids had to be there every Monday through Friday for 6 hours. They had to, no choice. Adults don't have to do that. They don't like what you're doing. They don't like what you're selling. They're gone. So how do we keep those people in? By making it fun, by making it a place they want to come, where they want to see their friends. They're enjoying the music a little bit. They want to see their friends. They like the moving around on the floor, getting a little exercise. They want to be with their friends. We've got to bring that into it, and we will keep them. That's been my experience with the Texas Reelers, and that's, of course, my opinion, but it's based on my experience, strength, and hope that I'm bringing forward. And I'm also really hoping that we're going to get more people to sign up on the bandwagon and see this. Now, there's been an area that has said, you know what, let's try this for 2 years. If it falls apart and it's ooky and we don't like it and we're not getting the new people we're hoping on, we can go back to the way it was. I liked Bear's comment about it being a 3-year commitment. Why not? What have you got to lose? Where are you going to go? Make the commitment, get in there, get in the trenches again, and we have a chance to completely replant the farm. Let's do this. So now I know there's 1,000 questions. John, is there anything that you would like to add in here, baby? He's been so patient, you have no idea.
I just like to add one thing before we open it back up, is the other thing I've looked at with the whole SSD format and people wanting to have the mainstream and then the plus and having little stepping stones is up till now, it takes 70 calls to get through mainstream. And then it's only a little 30 call step to the plus program. So it's such an easy little step. And if we got 50 now in SSD and we do an SSD to plus, well, that's going to be 50 more calls. It's going to be a bigger commitment. It's not going to be something they're just going to take lightly. It's going to be a big commitment again. And so I used to be able to teach a plus class in a weekend because it was only 30 calls, and I cherry picked dancers who could dance. And if they could dance mainstream, teaching, they knew the language, I could teach them the other 30 calls in 2 to 7 hour days on one weekend and get them out on the dance floor, and they end up being very good dancers. I can't do that anymore. Doesn't break my heart because I really believe in what we've got. But 50 calls to SSD, 50 calls to plus, 50-ish calls to A1, 50 more calls to A2. If you want to make a balance of those kind of things, that to me makes a lot of sense. And it's something that I'm going to be working at doing here. Some people are talking about having SSD to mainstream. I think the more little steps you have in there, the easier it's going to be for somebody to say, oh, I want to do that. You know, I want to make a big commitment. I want them to be happy. I want to entertain them what we've been doing. Now I've been coming back. We haven't had any classes. We don't have SSD. I've been calling SSD dances anytime they hire me to do a mainstream or I do an SSD dance for my practice and to prove to them that they're not missing a thing. I've called with other callers and said, did you notice any difference tonight? They called mainstream and I called SSD. They threw in an Allemandar once. They threw in a spin the top. Did you miss anything? Were you having a bad time while I was calling? And so like Deborah Carroll says, you have to put more work into as a caller. But, you know, and some people say, well, not everybody's going to call like Deborah Carroll Jones. Not everybody's going to call like Bear. But it's going to take some work because a really bad mainstream caller or SSD dancer is going to be a really bad plus caller as well. It won't make any difference because they have more calls. Doesn't make their talent any better. This gives them more calls to throw around. So anyway, I'll shut up now and we'll turn it back to Bonnie and we can turn over some questions if you want to ask some of the questions. And Deborah thinks has a hand up. Or John wants to say something.
Yeah.
We'll let John talk.
Okay.
Is it my turn?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Barry, you made some very nice comments about Deborah, introducing her and about how great she is at so many activities and so many items. Please keep in mind in the future that I have to live with this woman.
John, you don't have to live with her. It's a choice and you're a lucky man. So shut up.
Yeah.
She told me I better shut up. No, she is. You're exactly right with the comments that you made. The situation with the Texas Reelers Club, Deborah and I talked about it for quite some time before she became their club caller. And they had a problem prior to that. And a lot of the people left the club. But when Deborah decided to go ahead and be their caller, they had 32 members in the club. And like she has said, we began the SSD program 5 years ago now, time-wise. And the club, up until we had to stop for the pandemic, the club had increased in size 200% by teaching the SSD program. And we would have some people that would come and say, what is this thing with plus? We'd tell them and announce to them over the microphone, you don't even need to think about that. That's the whole new game. Don't worry about it. Now, with regard to the plus tip itself at her dance, I watched what took place, and most of the clubs here in this area and a lot of other areas have refreshments. The Texas Reelers refreshments were ready right after the first tip. Guess where everybody went? Except maybe 1 or 2 squares that were at the tail end of the line, and they would get up and dance, and then they would go have refreshments. And I suggested that if she's going to have a plus tip, let it be the second tip. Those who want to dance it will stay in there and dance it, and then they can go have refreshments afterwards. And all the new dancers didn't have to sit out. They were sitting out having refreshments. And that made a big difference in the attitude and everything with the club. And it has worked great for over 4 years. And so that worked out really well. As Deborah mentioned earlier, we had some callers here in the area that said that they were not going to reduce their calling program. They were going to call full mainstream. And there were 3 of them said that we're not going to go to this SSD program. We're staying with what we've got. So Deborah and I made it a point to attend one of their dances. And we made up a list of the number of calls that they did not use that were on the mainstream program. And they did not realize that they were actually calling an SSD program. They thought they were calling full mainstream and weren't fully aware of it. Well, 2 of them immediately after that started using the SSD program, and we're trying to convince the other one to come in with it also, because there's all but about 1 or 2 clubs here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area are going to mainstream and using mainstream. Currently, they've all started back dancing, and that's what they're doing. They're trying to build the clubs. And when the program began, there were 50% of the callers here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area that went into the SSD program. That represented 50% of the clubs in our area that were using the SSD program. Well, the association itself had a scholarship and a what was it called?
Lesson grant?
Lesson grant. But it stated that you had to teach the full mainstream program. Well, that eliminated 50% of their clubs from being able to qualify for a lesson grant. So they changed the bylaws and the rules and made it any program that is represented by Caller Lab will be accepted for a lesson grant. So everybody got to be able to qualify right away for that. So a big change is taking place, mostly in the United States and a lot in Canada. The SSD program is being used in Europe in numerous places. It's also being used in Australia and New Zealand and Japan. And the activity where they're using it is progressing and growing. And it has proven itself to be a very viable activity for the square dance activity. They don't have to be in class all year or 9 months trying to learn to square dance with their friends who brought them in. They can get mixed together real quick and put lots more emphasis on sociability of everything. So it'll work, guarantee it. Thank you.
Thank you all for your great input. And I do want to get to some of the questions, but I also want to thank Kurt and a couple of the other folks. A lot of the dialogue on the chat has been in discussion, and some of the questions and explanations have been answered. So I do appreciate that. And if any of you are not viewing the chat, I encourage you to do that. I know I have a question, but also one of the questions that was asked was, what is your fee structure for your dancing?
It used to be $7 or $8 a person in the Denver area. And since we come back from the pandemic, and then it was $1 less per person for members type thing. And since I started doing dances that were just kind of non-club oriented and my own collar run clubs, I went, because we're having such small numbers, we went to $10 a person. And I haven't had any complaints. I always make it known to dancers that and we don't have a treasurer at the door taking the money. We have a basket up on the stage. And if money is tight, don't pay, come dance with us instead. But it's really hard to go up to a treasurer and say, you know, my life is hard right now, but it's nice to be able to come in, write down your name and not put money in the basket. I've gone so far as just saying, of all the stupid things in my world, to say, if you need money, take it out of the basket. If you're in that kind of desperate need, take some money out of the basket. I don't count and add up. I pay the hall, I pay the queuer, and then I get the rest for the club and myself. But so then I had to figure out what to do for the club members. And so now what we're doing is as they give us their dues, our dues are $15 per person. I give them 2 free passes that they can use for a dance during the year. And that way they're getting something for their money. But you know what else I found out? I don't have to deal with $1 bills anymore. I'm so happy. So
Our classes are paid for up front. And the reason that they are paid for up front, where you're paying for the entire set of lessons, is because the classes are offered through a recreation center. So I am technically an employee of the city of Richardson, and the people pay at the desk where the recreation center is located. And then at the end of the class, I turn in an invoice. The recreation center keeps a percentage of the income and pays me by check for the rest. As far as club structure is done, the club pays dues, and that means they do not pay at the door. Visitors pay at the door, but the club fee structure, the dues, covers all of the club dances, and the members pay their dues every 6 months.
Okay, a couple of comments on that is, you know, Deborah, you said that they pay all of it up front. Tell us again, you know, how many weeks does that cover? Because I heard a couple of different durations from you. So, you know, how many weeks does that cover, and what does that average out to? Do you happen to know per lesson?
Well, our lessons coming up this fall are going to be $75 per person. And they go, I think this chunk of classes is 14 weeks. It depends on the calendar, Bonnie, because we start the beginning of September and then we end about the beginning of December. And
Okay.
sometimes there's an extra week thrown in there, whatever. Previously, our lessons have been 65 sometimes. And same with the 8-week class, I will usually drop the fee down at that point in time. It doesn't average out to much more than $5 or $6 a week. It's an extremely inexpensive.
Way to go.
Okay, thank you. I'm okay.
Very good. And I'm seeing, again, a lot of other comments, but one of the ones that I have thought about, you know, from the beginning, Bear mentioned that, you know, in Colorado, most of the clubs are mainstream. From what you and John are saying, a lot of your clubs in Texas are mainstream. You well know that California is a plus advanced push to challenge. And so we're getting more resistance, I think, from some of the clubs. Again, as you guys mentioned, the people who don't want to give up their way of living and their way of dancing. How would you guys address that? And I know we have a lot of other callers on here. So maybe towards the end, we can, you know, open it up to some of them and how they're dealing with it. But I would like to see how, you know, you and Bear and John are dealing with that attitude, or do you face it?
I haven't so much faced that push because I don't consider myself, and I may be odd in this regard, but I've never considered myself an employee of the club. I'm not. I am an independent contractor, and I choose who I work for. So if you're going to hire me, you are hiring me for my expertise or for what I can bring to the table. If that's not going to work for you, then you need to hire somebody else. And so to me, I'm on the level with hiring somebody to come in and repipe your house or redo your wiring. You have to hire somebody you trust, and then you have to get out of their way and let them do their job.
Mhm.
So when it comes to that, I have a little more autonomy in what happens. And that's just because that's how I view myself in this field in which I work. Yes, I'm open to ideas and I'm open to requests, and I will try to shift and tilt. I don't know so much if I bend, but I will tilt to try to accommodate the requests of those that are in charge. Sometimes they're just going to have to take my word for it. Let's just see how this works out.
Okay, thank you. Bear, do you have any feedback on that?
I was just gonna say, I got distracted when Deborah started talking. It happens a lot when she does. Um, but, but yeah, there's some pushing some things on that, but it's one of those things. It's if people can make a commitment. I know Southern California has talked and they're gonna make a 2-year commitment or a 3-year commitment. It's like, how are things working now? If they're not working, we need to look and see how we're doing that. And as leaders, we not only have to do what we want to do, that we like to do, but we also have to do what's best for our club and our activity. I have 4 clubs, 2 caller run clubs, and two clubs that are board based. And I'm like Deborah, I have a lot of influence on those clubs. One of them I have more influence on than the other. My Rainbows, they have a board and they have their own ideas. They're willing to listen to me, and I try to, like she said, I try to bend them. They try to bend me a little bit. But once again, the board there, that's a multi-level club. They dance mainstream and plus and advanced and challenge on different nights of the week. It's not a huge club, but it has close to 100 members, and they have enough support to dance all those programs, and they can do that. So, but the leaders are the ones dancing the C1, C2 for the most part. And so it makes it harder because once again, they don't have the view of what we need to have to build that. They're starting to realize because of our numbers that we need to do something, but how it's going to be and what it's going to be, it's going to do. But you're all great leaders here. You guys can make things happen. And so, callers can talk to their blue in the face, but it's you guys, the USDA, the leaders of the clubs, you guys are the ones who are going to make these real decisions and what you can help influence other people to do. And sometimes the best thing to do is show them success. And hopefully as things come around, people start getting back into it. We're going to see more people doing this. That success will breed success. And then it's like, well, why didn't we do that? And I'm like, why do we wait for somebody else to either be successful or not? We're not being successful. Let's change. I'll shut up.
Thank you. One of the other comments that came up in the chat was, what if you're the only club in the area doing SSD? How do we get, them the chance to experience other dances and, go places? I know, for example, Kip Garvey up here in the Sacramento area, he's had a club that he's been doing an SSD program for several years. The problem is they were basically the only club in the area. I think the next closest club was down in the Bay Area, which was 3 hours away. And I think that, for all of us, ultimately, whether it's, sticking strictly to an SSD, I know as a festival chairman, as a, even when you do association dances or, your state conventions, those kind of things, we want to get dancers to come. So as a convention chairman, I'm looking at, do I have an SSD hall? Do I have or whatever? But if we aren't getting these people to come out and visit other clubs, how are we going to get them to come to a bigger event? So what have you done, or have you done anything to try to get your other clubs to do this SSD program and then get your dancers to go participate at other clubs besides your own?
I can only speak for myself. I have gone with them. Okay, if they're going to go somewhere but I also will contact the caller ahead of time and say my club is coming and they want to participate, and every caller I've ever talked to has said, we'll take good care of them, Deborah. And then when Mother walks in the hall with them, they know that, oh yes, they will take care of my babies. And that seems to have worked out very well. As far as getting them to bigger events, Bonnie, I just don't know, because I don't know how much these casual dancers are going to want to commit to what it takes to be able to go to a bigger event. And maybe some of the clubs, as they can start tapping into that with their social gatherings, where they encourage the club, hey, we're going to have a overnight at such and such a camping place. Come on down and be a part of it, and we'll square dance a little bit, and we'll have games, and we'll do this, that, and the other. That encourages them to get together, invite a couple of other clubs maybe to join, and then funnel them in. I don't know. I don't have an answer for that, because we don't really know the mindset of this new breed of dancers that we're going to be cultivating.
But I also believe that they're going to want to do more things than we give them credit for. I remember when I was in class, when I was taking class, we went to a new dancer hoedown like after 5-6 weeks of class. And there was a flyer there to go on a train trip. Well, I didn't know much, but they had this flyer at that dance, so I figured I could go. Well, lo and behold, it was just after first year, and it was full mainstream, and I was only halfway through my class. So we crash course some calls, and we sit in the corner with our other friends and do it. So I think, you know, one of the things is, if you're planning a festival, you're planning a weekend, you know, if you have an SSD hall, any mainstream dancer from any mainstream club can go in that hall and dance. You know, so that's one of those focus things you have to realize, is that the callers will call SSD, but if they're a mainstream dancer, they can walk in there and dance. Somebody asked if, I saw that go by, if callers are going to call from all different positions to do the SSD to make more variety. Well, the concept there is to not necessarily do that. You can do that with some workshops and do some things, but the concept is to work harder, make it flow, make it fun, make it creative, without having to go to, I want to do an inverted box to do this, to a flip flop, to that, to do a do-si-do. You know, that's not what these people are there for. That's not what they really want. That's why you still need to give the experienced dancers something. You can give them a little twist, but you can't just turn it inside out for these dancers, because that's just going to say, if they aren't successful, they aren't coming back. So you can push them a little bit, but you can't push them too hard. That's my theory.
There, if I may, for everybody's information, at the National Convention this year in Jackson, Mississippi, there were 4 SSD sessions. They were not well attended, but it was better than what we had expected. And those of us who call the SSD program were programmed in there to call for those people. And as always, the most popular hall was the so-called mainstream hall that had the live band, the Ghost Riders band, playing in there. And I spent a lot of time observing and listening to what was being called, and mostly what was not being called in the mainstream hall. And nearly every caller that got up to the microphone was using the SSD program. Very seldom did we hear a Spin the Top or an Ali Mandar. It may be 1 or 2 per evening, but it was not every tip a full mainstream. It was relaxed and everybody having a good time. So the association people, and such as the USDA and all other associations, state associations or whatever, that are going to have to back off, because they're actually getting it whether they realize it or not. Thank you.
May I quickly follow on with, in addition to the SSD there, the next 2 IAGSDC conventions have committed to SSD halls and SSD for all the all skate activities.
That's great. And I know that that's one of the things that's been talked about is, you know, do we do those halls and what size halls? And I think it's really important. And I think we just have to watch and see what happens over the next few months. You know, somebody made the comment, it might've been you, Kurt, but you know, some groups are talking about splitting their dance night. You know, they don't have the flexibility to have, you know, 2 or 3 different halls or 2 or 3 different nights during the week that they can dance. So they're splitting their sessions, much like the old, New Dancer Plus. You know, the first half of the night is New Dancers, the second half is Plus or mainstream, whatever your club is. I'm also seeing comments, and maybe this is a key, is that if we start really promoting that the club is doing the SSD program, that might increase the awareness, because if the general public, and by that I mean the general square dance public, doesn't know that your club is doing SSD, then how do we know if our club is doing it and your club is doing it, but we don't know about that? We don't have that opportunity to get them to go and visit and meet other people. So I think us as dance leaders need to promote that our club is doing the SSD program, so that you create that awareness of where the other opportunities are. So, and Kurt, again, I want to thank you for all of your input on the chat. Bear and Deborah, will you clarify? I know that there was some response. Are you looking at teaching SSD from all different positions or just standard positions? And the other thing I would like you to talk about, I know we have a lot of callers on here, but even for the dance leaders, I know Caller Lab has a lot of materials available. So to help callers, because let's face it, not everybody is a Bear Miller or a Deborah Carroll Jones or John Jones. What do the local club callers, where can they go for more information and for assistance on these programs?
In the social square dance booklet that they have, it gives in Caller Lab, they give a complete laydown, class by class, what you're going to teach that night. They're going to give you modules you can use. They're going to give you singing calls you can use. They can make this very simple for a caller to make the adjustment, and then they have to add things onto it. The goal is not necessarily to give them in class teaching from all different positions. You're going to be doing that with floor time and everything else. They're going to have the basics to it down. They're going to be able to do some things, but you're not going to spend the time teaching as much from there, but you're still going to have boys run and girls run, and you're going to do those kind of things. So I've also been to callers classes where when I called a dance, they didn't know how to have a girls run because the caller had only called boys run their entire career. So, it's going to be one of those things that, but if you look at that stuff that Jerry Story and Noah and the committee put together, it's an amazing piece of work that gives a caller to work with. Hands spoon feeds them exactly how to do it, materials to use, and how to do it. Now the whole thing is all about presentation. Deborah is one of the best in the world. Sorry, John, but Deborah is, and so it's easy to be drawn to her and do and when she becomes mother, she becomes mother. So it's what it is, but we have to make it work for what we do. But the Caller Lab and the committee has given us a great piece of material to work with, to work from. So,
and they also have a checklist, that is a blessing to me. I can look from week to week, and it's all spreadsheeted out to where I can check off that I've made sure that I've brought that call back in and given them a little bit of floor time on it. And as far as any of the all position stuff, those are the kind of things that you can do even at a dance. Just show a little thing and then dance it for that tip, and then leave it alone. Set it aside and let them dance. We've gotten so into teaching that we have this stop-start drill team going on, rather than the wind in your face and the forward motion and the hand over hand and the success. That's what we want to put out in front of these people.
One of the best ways to get an area to use the SSD program is to convince the callers to call it. And they can do it, and they can call it, and they can set it up and never say a word to anybody, and it'll work.
And one of the other comments that came up is, people are expecting the plus dancers to go in and try to poach these SSD dancers to make them move forward. And maybe, the key to some of that is, most of you callers are, if you're calling the SSD, you're probably already calling mainstream and plus or advanced in other places. And so, maybe the great way to go is to really discourage your plus and advanced and mainstream members from trying to poach these. I mean, a lot of it is in the attitude you set up. And I think, as dance leaders, we need to do the same thing. I remember a club that wouldn't do a new dancer class in our area because they expected all of the plus dancers, just the good plus dancers, of course, to go and fill in their club. They didn't want to do any classes. They wanted the ready-made, plus. And I think it behooves all of us, both as callers and dance leaders, to really support this SSD program if we're doing it, and not encourage your other club members to not do this poaching until these people are ready. Because I think you're right. They aren't getting the foundation. They aren't getting the enjoyment. So they come in and they do it for a while, and then they get so frustrated because there's so much pressure to move up and to learn more. And, then it's not fun anymore. So,
Right. We
I-
have to protect those people. It's our job to protect them. And that sometimes that means also educating the survivors on a different definition of fun. And it doesn't always necessarily mean more calls. And we're in the process of rebuilding this activity and putting more emphasis on the social aspect of it and much less on the climbing the ladders. And that re-education is a necessary process for this to occur.
Right. Well, I know that a couple of years, our local association here in the Sacramento area participated in the California Homeschool Convention. And time after time after time, when we talked to these homeschool parents, they were looking for that physical activity for their kids. But they, the minute we said it's a 9 to 12 month process and you have to come every week and all of that, they're like, no, we're going to go do contra, or we're going to do something else because we can go, we can have, as a family, we have fun, but we've got so many other activities. We don't want to make that long commitment. And I think this SSD, if we really stress that, yes, it's okay to miss a week. Yes, it's okay to, to come back, and we're going to repeat things soon enough. And I think we might be able to bring some of those people in if we have the right approach.
One of the things that we did for our club, I'm just throwing this out here, is that we have, of course, you have angels within your club that come to the class. We also have another step, which is called a mentor. And a mentor couple is one that will agree to take a new couple under their wing and be there every week to dance with them, not only just with them, but to meet them and to introduce them to other angel couples. And through them, they get introduced to other mentor couples. And through them, they get introduced often to all of the class members and the club members that are there. And those mentors are there also to encourage them to participate in any of the social activities that the club has, such as our picnic or dinner night out once a month, or going to the theater or the Christmas party, or whatever it is that they've come up with. And that has been a good process. It takes a big commitment on the part of the mentor couples to do that. But it has made a huge difference in socially bonding those people to the club. The calls are nothing more than the bricks, kids. You can stack bricks and say you've made a wall, but it's the sociability that's the mortar and the rebar. And if that's in that wall, it's going to stand for a much longer time than if it's just bricks stacked on bricks.
Let me tell you one other experience that we had that I think is very interesting, that after we had done the SSD program for 2 years, there were a couple of couples in the club, leaders in the club, that felt like that we had dumbed down the club and that SSD was dumbing down the dance activity in the area, and they wanted to keep it up to mainstream. So they had a special meeting and invited Deborah and me to attend the meeting and to listen to and discuss the situation. And after they had talked about it for some time, then we asked more than 50% of the people at this meeting were new dancers in the club that had come in the last 2 years. So we asked them the question, within the mainstream program, there are 16 calls that are not in the SSD program. How would you new dancers have felt if we had forced you to try to learn an additional 16 calls? And almost every one of them held up their hand and said, we would have quit.
Or be gone.
We'd have left.
Mm-hmm.
So that to me was a big response.
And it also opened the eyes of the survivors.
Okay, I made the comment about they could miss a week or two, and somebody said that if you're pushing to teach 50+ calls in 12 to 14 weeks, can you afford to let somebody miss a week?
Okay, the mentors are also encouraged that if their babies miss a week, and excuse me for using that word, that's just the word came out of my mouth. If their new students miss a week, then it's up to them to contact them and say, hey, I tell you what, let's get to class early. You know that Deborah's always there early. We'll get out in the patio because we have a class in our room right before we start. So we're hustling them out and hustling ours in and setting up everything, but we're waiting. So we went out in the patio and caught them up a little bit. And that worked out great. There's a couple of couples that got a square together at their house and helped them through it. Are they going to teach like I'm going to teach? No, I don't care. At least they gave them a little bit of instruction, a little bit of floor time, and a lot of support, and that kept them in the class.
I'm very fortunate with my Rocky Mountain Rainbows. We have a caller who is learning to call. And every week after we start class, he comes in a half an hour early and just does a half hour, no music, just a review of the things that were taught the week before and possibly the week before that, and which really helps for weaker dancers to be able to do. And if they miss a week, they've got that to work with it, as well as being able to get into class where I review everything anyway. My other group, my other mainstream group is we do classes through the NEST program. We're self-paced. So if you miss 3 weeks, I don't care. We just pick you up where you came back because we meticulously, it's labor intensive, but we take care of everybody. It's self-paced. I've had people finish mainstream in 10 weeks. I've had a lady in my class that was in the class for over a year, because we all know people learn at different paces. And usually when we teach a class, we have to teach at the slowest person's pace. And sometimes we lose some really good dancers because it's too slow for them. So I really like that. So it gives, those are two different options that clubs can use.
I think those are some great tips. I'm going to go ahead and open up the questions. Don't unmute yourself until I call on you, but if you have a additional question, put your hand up. I'll try to catch them all. And then unmute as we call on you. Anybody see any hands up anywhere?
Robin had her hand up.
I'm sorry, who did?
Robin?
Okay, Robin, go ahead.
My concern is an even bigger fracturing of the square dance family, because right now we have people who dance challenge and they don't want to talk to, help, babysit, and assist in any way the mainstream and plus dancers or the advanced dancers. They're in their own little challenge bubble. And now I just feel like this is like pushing people even farther apart, because it's creating a whole program for which there is no technical bridge between that program, social square dancing, and either mainstream or plus. So, and I am one of the California kids who are in the, rush to the finish line, although I still only dance advanced, but I worry about that. And I'd like to know what people who, I don't know, maybe it doesn't matter in Texas because most of your dancers are mainstream and not challenge or something, but do you see any fracturing or disassociation?
Well, again, I am very focused on the new dancer and bringing in new folks. I really understand your question, Robin, and I appreciate it. The challenge dancer and the advanced dancer do not recruit. Like you said, they don't help. They don't come in Angel. They don't do anything like that. I have heard, I'm presuming this is true, that in the country of Japan, when they saw a great chunk of their population going up into advanced and challenge, because that's what they enjoyed and that's what they wanted to do, and they should do that. But they realized that if they did that and they did not take care of the base, there was going to be a problem. So what they have done there, the structure they have set up, is that if you dance advanced and challenge, you must belong to and support, at that time, a mainstream club, or you will not be permitted to the events that are geared for those dancers. Now, granted, their culture is a different structure than ours is here. I guess I'm just not so worried about them anymore, Robin. I'm more worried about getting our new people in, and the people that have been dancing plus but haven't danced in a year and a half and have aged in that year and a half, maybe coming back and going, I don't know how to do this stuff anymore. I guess I can't square dance anymore if they come back to a full plus level dance. But they come into SSD, they come in and they Angel and they help in SSD. It gets their confidence and their skills up, and they might find that they are just perfect right where they are. And they don't even miss the other stuff anymore. I'm hoping.
Thanks, Deborah. And I think, you know, my friend Jim Masco has a great quote that he's been using a lot lately. It's not as important where we dance, it's that we are dancing at all. And that's the big thing. We have lost so many dancers, you know, and especially this last year between illnesses and changing ideas and all of that, that the real key here is that we need to get people back dancing. Donna Roby has had her hand up. Go ahead, Donna.
Thank you. I don't have a question, I have a comment. I think this SSD program is great, but I think we all, as dancers who have danced for a few years, need to remember we had to learn. And so we've got to help these new people advance if they choose to advance.
Or just learn to dance.
Or just learn to dance. I mean, people who are dancing plus and challenge and advanced, some of us do recruit, but you have to remember that you had to learn to dance also. And I enjoy dancing with new dancers.
Thank you, Donna. I want to refer a little bit to Brian Emler. He had some comments. He's our friend from Canada, and I know we've got several Canadians on the call today. But Brian, you talked a little bit about the marketing aspects of this. Do you want to elaborate on that a bit?
Yeah, hi there, everybody. I'm wondering well, about a couple of things here. Is there going to be a groundswell of interest in our recreation post-pandemically because people, having gone through social isolation, will desperately look to activities such as ours? I'll just tag onto that. Thinking demographically, it is the boomer generation probably that's our key target. They're currently aged 57 to 75. Some of them are in the workforce, and I'm noticing clubs are starting lessons far too late in the evening, like 8 o'clock's crazy for a working person, especially if they start the next day at 6 a.m. So there needs to be a prime consideration to their needs. Okay, I'll turn it over to you.
If I can, we're facing a crux right now in the hours that our recreation center is open. Right now, the recreation center is only open until 8 o'clock. It's been open until 10. And so our classes have been from 7:15 to 9:15, typically on Tuesday nights. Well, with us not being able to participate and some of the other people that provide classes at the rec center being able to do so, we have lost our priority with getting that Tuesday night back. So, and they called me and said, you're going to have to pick another night and another time. And they gave me Mondays from 6 o'clock until 8 o'clock. And I'm kind of hoping, honestly, Brian, that it ends up being that way, because it would make our drive out there, which is an hour one way, it would make our drive much easier. And I would be able to get home a little earlier because, you know, we have a long commute. So I don't know. I think having the classes a little earlier is a great idea. So maybe it will come to pass for us.
I was going to say, here in British Columbia, we've got a caller in the Vancouver area. He's suggesting that the newcomers can very well accept a 6 o'clock start, especially if they're working people. That in fact, he's had newcomers in his club say, I grab a sandwich before the session, and then after the session, 7:30 or 8, I either go home and have a bigger meal, or I dine out. At least I can relax after the dancing. So there's a newcomer speaking about the time issue.
It might be a good opportunity to help encourage the social bonding as well. You could make a group going out to dinner together with the club.
What about the
Great.
Sorry, what about the post-pandemic situation? Are we going to see a groundswell of interest? And is it maybe solely dependent upon how well we publicize, promote, and purchase paid advertising for that to happen?
Bingo.
I hope so. It's one of those things that people are going to be too scared still to go out, or really craving to have that social bonding with somebody. And I think that's something when we do advertise, that's one of the biggest things we have to sell. We have to sell that we're an amazing group of good people who it's just good to be with and be able to socialize with and reconnect with. But we're also, you know, that's the whole thing. It's a marketable thing where it's not forever in class. You don't make a huge commitment, and it's a much easier thing. So I'm hoping so. I saw a question go by earlier about length of classes. In my experience, I'm pretty lucky. I've been calling for 30 years now. And I've taught over 100 mainstream classes. I'm very blessed in my area. I do a lot of teaching. And I have learned in my experience that maybe it's me how I teach, but after an hour and a half, I start seeing the glazed over look in their eyes when I try to introduce anything new. So I keep my classes to an hour and a half. If I go a little bit longer, the last little time is just about fun, or it's just hanging out. There is nothing serious going on the last little bit because of that glazed over look. It's kind of like now we've gone an hour and a half and I'm seeing more glazed looks now on people's faces. It's just the human nature. So I keep my classes to an hour and a half.
I think that's a good point. You know, the other thing that I think we all need to be aware of, again, both as callers and dance leaders, as we get back into dancing and things are opening up, you know, square dancing is still one of those things that, because of, you know, between the yellow rocks and the hand holding and the swinging, you know, you're close to close with people. And there's been a lot of discussion, and I don't want to delve into it so much as far as, you know, the hows and the whys and the wheres. But I think that we need to be proactive in being a positive force. I've seen postings that people have just jumped all over club members or club leaders because, you know, they ask people to be vaccinated or this or that. And again, I don't want to get into that discussion, but I think we need to really practice the kindness and the consideration and know that the leaders of these clubs are making the best decisions they can based on the people in their group, based on the area they're dancing. We need to stop criticizing each other. We need to encourage each other and support each other. And I think that's a really important aspect. It just breaks my heart when I see some members of the square dance community criticizing other members of the square dance community for the efforts they're trying to make. Bear, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I am a firm believer in yellow rocks and red rocks and purple rocks and all of the hugging and everything. But I started thinking about it even before the pandemic came along, and not everybody's comfortable with that. So now in my classes, when I do, and when I'm calling in my local clubs, I've taught something a little different. If the caller says a yellow rock or hug your corner, however they want to say it, I teach them to kind of look first. And then if they put their own hands on top of their own shoulders and kind of bow to you, it just means it's not a comfort level for them. Please respect that, but just don't go over and start grabbing them and pulling them in anyway and hugging the bejeebies out of them. But it gives them an outlet, and they can shake hands or they can just bow. But if they just put their hands on their own shoulders and bow lightly to that person, it gives them an out that's, I'm trying to make acceptable around here. And it's something I'd like to see more places do, to give that person who isn't as huggy, or with the social distancing things now, we're getting them to get into a room, they may not feel comfortable, and it gives them an out. So I'm going to be using that from here on out.
I like it. Paul, you've had your hand up for a while over there. And Sally?
But
Go ahead.
Yeah, my problem is with California in general. As one of the officers for a long time, I have a big thing about the plus and anything above that. I think they should do away with the titles altogether, because you're square dancing there. You're square dancing. You're there for the camaraderie of the people around you. It doesn't matter if you're be dancing up in the mountains somewhere, but it's the people getting out there dancing together. And you don't need a title to be able to do that. So my views are, you should be able to dance without having plus mainstream. Mainstream is just an upgrade of this new dance they were talking about, but the A1, A2, and all the rest of that is a plus to the people who already know it. We need to get the people who don't know it yet, and don't put a title on anything until we get it back to dancing right. That's just an opinion of mine. I'm in the majority.
Thanks, Al Paul. I keep looking, and thanks, Deborah, for catching him. I couldn't tell if he was stretching or trying to put his hand up. Sorry, Al Paul. Anybody else have any comments or questions directed to the SSD program?
Kurt. Put his hand up.
Go ahead. Kurt.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on the earlier question from Robin, I think it was, about the connections or disconnections between subgroups of our community that are dancing in different programs. For one thing, the whole idea of support of the, let's call them lower levels, the earlier entry level programs by the upper level dancers is in a large extent a regional cultural issue. In the San Francisco Bay Area, for example, I'd say about half of our advanced and a third of our challenge community are there to support plus dances and beginner activities in fairly strong numbers, which is a great thing. And perhaps there are things that the club leaderships can work together to encourage that sort of thing, emphasizing to the higher level clubs that they can only exist by way of recruitment from lower level programs. So it's in their interest to support the lower levels. In fact, I'm thinking of that, that we should maybe make it even more explicit and have the upper level clubs contribute towards the promotional efforts and the perhaps even some financial contribution, as well as sending angels. Of course, that's for each set of groups to work out. Now, in terms of will SSD divide this further into sort of three areas, the key is and this is the area that has been sort of worked on the least, and we all are going to have to work together and work on this going forward, is there needs to be this bridge from an SSD community to the plus and above rest of the MWSD community for those people for which it's appropriate and who are interested. The key is to not have the escalator and the peer pressure to push people to move up, but to provide a path for those that will probably drop out of the casual activity if they don't have that. I think one of the things is by the clubs that are providing both of those activities to work together to have a formal path for that and a formal way to introduce that concept to people when they're ready will help deter the random poaching kind of effect.
Any other comments? All right, one of the things that I don't normally do, but I do plan because there's been some good discussion on the chat, is after the webinar is over, probably early next week, we will post the handouts, both the slideshow and the other document on the SSD in a nutshell. We'll post those to the USDA website, which is www.usda.org. Also, I am going to go ahead and post the chat discussion because I think it answers some questions and does all of that. So I do thank all of you that participated in that. I also want to say that it's a great lead in. Some of the comments that both Deborah and John and Bear made is about the sociability. And that's just perfect because our webinar next month is going to be Mike Seastrom, and he is going to talk about the sociability of square dancing. And I think it's just going to be an absolutely wonderful program. It's getting, social connections, the key to club success. How do we make these people part of our family, part of our lifelong friends? So often clubs now, people go, I equate it with going to a movie. You go to the movie, you pay your money, you go in, you watch the movie, you leave. You don't get to know the other people around you. And we need to bring that social aspect back into square dancing. And Mike is going to talk about that with us this next month. I want to thank all of you for participating. I especially want to thank Bear for the great, and Bear's got his hand up, so I'll stop talking and let you talk a second, Bear.
Okay, I just want to put out a great, amazing thank you for all your work together and to make the adjustment, the time for me, because I'm lucky enough I get to go call a dance this afternoon and tonight. So I'm very fortunate in those kind of things. But Kurt, thank you very much for all your work on the paper that we put together, that you kind of did a majority of the work. And so I appreciate everything. And thank you for following up on all the things. Deborah Carroll Jones, I love you, baby. You are just amazing. You've brought so much to this, and it's really great to have your experiences. But USDA, thank you very much for the opportunity and the honor of getting to do this with you today. So, but I'm going to have to scoot here in a couple minutes because I do have to go call a dance. And
right.
And my wife thinks I should have pants on. I don't have to have pants on for this, but she thinks I should. If I go to the dance, I should have pants on. So.
Thanks,
and I do want to thank you, Bear and Deborah and John, especially. This has been an amazing workshop, and I appreciate all of you that have participated. If any of you that are on the group, we post our webinars to our website, but also we have an email list. So if any of you want to get direct email notification of our upcoming webinars, please email us at socialmedia@usda.org. Give us your name and your email address, and we will add you to that direct email listing for future webinars.
Can you put that in the chat?
I will. Thank you. But we, as I said, next month we have Mike Seastrom with the Social Connections. Teresa Berger and I are working on a program for September about callers and recruiting new callers and training new callers, because we've seen a great exodus of callers for various reasons, and many of our clubs are struggling to find callers. So how do we as dancers, dance leaders, caller leaders, how do we support new people that want to come in to the program and learn to call? So that's going to be September. In October, we'll be talking about the United Square Dancers of America insurance program, which most of our clubs have. So we've got quite a few great programs coming up in the future. Again, thank you all for participating today. We really appreciate it. On behalf of United Square Dancers of America, thank you so much. Bear, Deborah, John.
God bless you all.
Thanks, Bonnie. Thanks, Deborah.
Thank you.
Bonnie, what's the date of the next meeting?
It is August 14th, and it
Thank you.
will be back at our regular time, which is 11 a.m. Pacific, and however you adjust across the country for that time frame.
Thanks, Bonnie. Love you, baby.
Love you too. Thank you. I'm posting that.